He was just 12. But what he did for a buried billionaire shocked the world. In a quiet, windswept town where nothing ever seemed to happen, 12-year-old Aiden lived in a crumbling farmhouse on the edge of a dying cornfield with his aging grandfather. Life hadn't just been hard. It had been relentless. His parents were gone, and his grandpa's body grew weaker each day. With no steady income and no help from anyone, Aiden had learned to carry burdens that should never rest on a child's shoulders. But he never once complained. He chopped wood, tended to the chickens, and scavenged old junk from abandoned barns just to trade for food and medicine. And every evening when his chores were done, he wandered the quiet back roads and forgotten trails, places where memories still whispered through rusted fences and broken mailboxes. One misty evening, as gray clouds rolled in low and the wind sighed through the trees, Aiden took a shortcut through the woods. His boots crunched over fallen twigs, his breath visible in the growing chill. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks. But then, there it was again. A muffled noise, weak, panicked, like someone calling from beneath the earth. He froze. His heart thudded. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But something inside, something brave, something desperate, pushed him forward. He followed the sound deeper into the shadows, his eyes darting between the trees, his ears straining. Then, just beyond a cluster of thorn bushes, he saw it. The ground was disturbed, freshly moved. Aiden rushed to it. Kneeling in the dirt, he scraped away leaves, then soil, then froze. A hand, pale, shaking, reaching upward. Someone was buried, alive. Not in a coffin, not protected, just trapped beneath cold earth, like trash someone had tried to hide. Aiden didn't scream. He didn't run. He dropped to his knees and started digging. His hands moved frantically, tearing through the dirt until a face began to emerge, swollen, bloodied, barely conscious. The man's eyes fluttered open, staring up at Aiden with silent desperation. Gagged with a blood-soaked rag and tied at the wrists, he looked like he had been left to die. Aiden didn't care who he was. Poor, rich, good, evil. None of it mattered. Not right now. Not when someone needed help. He yanked off the gag and whispered, "You're okay. I got you. Just hang on." His voice trembled, but his hands never stopped. The man was too heavy to carry. But Aiden didn't give up. He remembered the old storm shelter by Miller's Hill, half-rotted but still standing. He dragged the man inch by inch across the forest floor, the icy wind biting at his face, his arms screaming from the effort. By the time they reached it, Aiden was shaking. He pushed open the door, pulled the man inside, and covered him with his own flannel jacket. Then he sparked a fire with the emergency matchbook he kept in his sock. Smoke curled up into the darkness as the flames flickered to life. Aiden poured water into a cracked mug and held it to the man's lips. The stranger couldn't speak, but his eyes, those tired, astonished eyes, never left Aiden. The man's breathing had steadied, but he was far from safe. Aiden sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker shadows across the man's battered face. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from everything that had just happened. He was only 12. No one had ever taught him how to rescue someone. But he did it anyway, because when he saw that hand break through the soil, when he heard that desperate cry, something inside him refused to walk away. Aiden didn't sleep that night. He kept adding wood to the fire, checking the man's pulse, wiping dried blood from his forehead with a torn piece of his own shirt. He didn't even know the man's name. But every few minutes, those eyes would open just slightly, like they were trying to say something. There was no voice yet, only groans and shallow breaths. But Aiden understood. The man didn't just need warmth or water. He needed to believe someone cared. And Aiden made sure he did. At sunrise, Aiden finally stepped out of the cabin. The world outside was still and quiet, frost glistening over the leaves. He ran back toward town, his legs aching, lungs burning, heart racing with fear that the man might slip away while he was gone. He reached an old payphone outside a broken-down gas station, the only one that still worked. He called the local sheriff's office, voice cracking, trying not to sound like a scared kid. "Someone's hurt," he said. "In the woods. Please send help. Please hurry." An hour later, flashing lights cut through the trees. Paramedics stormed into the cabin, stunned by what they found. Not just a half-dead man with bruises and cracked ribs, but a 12-year-old boy covered in dirt and dried blood, shivering. Beside him, like a soldier who refused to leave the battlefield. They asked Aiden what happened. He didn't have answers. Only one sentence left his lips. He was buried alive. I couldn't leave him. The man was rushed to the hospital, and Aiden rode in the ambulance beside him. The nurses tried to keep the boy away from the ER doors, but the man, barely conscious, grabbed one of their wrists and whispered hoarsely, "He stays. Please, let him stay." That night, doctors said it was a miracle the man survived. And another miracle that someone so small, so young, had been the reason. 2 days passed. Aiden didn't go home. He sat in the waiting room, refusing to eat anything but crackers from a vending machine. Finally, a nurse came and told him the man had woken up. When Aiden walked into the room, the man's eyes filled with tears. He reached out a hand, weak but steady, and said in a raspy voice, "You saved me, son. No one ever did that for me before." Aiden just nodded, swallowing back the lump in his throat. "You were buried alive," he whispered. "Who would do that to you?" The man stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he said a name that didn't mean much to Aiden, but would soon shake the world. The hospital room was bathed in cold, sterile light, but inside it held a storm of silent tension. Aiden stood beside the bed, his small frame dwarfed by machines that beeped and hummed, marking the man's fragile fight for survival. Outside the window, clouds swirled heavy and dark, threatening a storm that mirrored the chaos brewing inside. The man's face was a roadmap of pain, bruises blooming like dark flowers, a cracked jaw held together by thin stitches. Yet beneath it all, there was a quiet power in his eyes, a flicker that refused to be snuffed out. The doctors whispered about his identity, words like billionaire and mysterious disappearance floating through the corridors like secrets desperate to be uncovered. Flashbacks cut through the stillness. A grand mansion, towering and opulent, its walls hiding stories of wealth and betrayal. Aiden saw flashes of a man dressed impeccably, moving through crowded rooms filled with expensive art and whispered conversations. Then the darkness, the fall from grace, the enemies who lurked in shadows, the whispered threats that turned to violence. Back in the hospital, the machines beeped faster. The tension tightened around Aiden like a cloak. Nurses rushed in, voices sharp but controlled. The man's fingers twitched, grasping for something, for hope, for a lifeline, for a way back to the world he was slipping from. Aiden's gaze hardened. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a guardian of a secret, a keeper of a life that had been snatched away in darkness. The world outside might never understand what happened here in this cold room, but he knew one thing. The man was fighting to come back, and so would he. Suddenly, the room's atmosphere shifted. A shadow flickered near the door. A figure appeared, tall and imposing, dressed in a sharp suit that whispered power and danger. The man's eyes locked onto the newcomer with a mix of fear and recognition. Aiden's heart pounded as the pieces of a hidden world began to fall into place. This was no ordinary rescue. This was the beginning of a battle, a fight for truth, justice, and survival that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew. Days passed like slow rivers, carrying with them pain, fear, and a fragile hope. Aiden stayed by the man's side, refusing to leave, even as the nights grew colder and lonelier. With each labored breath, the man seemed to fight, not just for life, but for a chance to rewrite his story. A story tangled in shadows, now reaching toward light. In the quiet moments, Aiden saw something unexpected. A glimpse of the man's true self beneath the scars and secrets. There was a vulnerability, a regret for choices made and bridges burned. Yet beneath it all was a fierce determination to make things right. Slowly, the man began to speak, first in broken whispers, then in clearer words. He told stories of lost family, of wealth that meant nothing without trust, and of enemies who had tried to bury him alive, both literally and in the ruins of his past. But more than that, he spoke of a vision, a future where pain could turn to purpose, where forgiveness could heal wounds deeper than flesh. Aiden listened, feeling a strange kinship with this fallen titan. Both were survivors, both carrying invisible scars, both searching for redemption in a world that often forgot the broken. Together they began to rebuild, piece by piece, moment by moment. The man's strength returned, fueled not by money or power, but by a newfound hope. He vowed to change, to protect those he loved, and to make sure no one else would suffer as he had. And Aiden, he found a hero in the man's resilience. Someone who, despite being buried by darkness, chose to rise and shine a light for others. Aiden didn't know who wanted the man buried alive, but one thing was clear. They weren't done yet. The man's whispered warnings grew urgent, his voice trembling as he revealed secrets about enemies with far-reaching power. People who would stop at nothing to silence him forever. Every creak of the old cabin floor sent chills down Aiden's spine. The fire's glow flickered like a heartbeat against the encroaching night. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it a sinister promise. The past was coming back to bury them both. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the fragile calm, a snap of a twig, a distant shout. Aiden's eyes darted toward the door. Was it friend or foe? Could they trust anyone? In that moment, everything changed. The fight for survival wasn't over. It had only just begun, and the secrets the man held could either save them or destroy. Them both. Aiden gripped the worn blanket tighter, bracing himself. Whatever was coming, he knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. Or not at all. Aiden had no training, no strength like grown men. No knowledge of the danger that whispered from every tree. But he had something greater, something untouchable. A heart too big for his 12-year-old chest, and a soul that refused to break. He didn't ask for this. He didn't wake up wanting to be brave. But when life called him, he stood taller than anyone ever expected. His shoes were soaked. His hands still bled from digging through frozen dirt. But when the man stirred beside the fire, groaning, in pain, Aiden leaned closer, eyes wide, gentle, and whispered, "You're safe now. I promise." There was something about his voice, something pure. The man blinked slowly, staring at this boy who had pulled him out of death's hands. Not a soldier, not a doctor, just a kid, but stronger than anyone he'd ever met. Aiden, gathered every crumb from his school bag, cracked cookies, half a sandwich. "It's not much," he said, "but it's yours." Then, with fingers trembling from cold, he gently dabbed the man's forehead with an old washcloth. His touch, though clumsy, was filled with the kind of care most adults forget how to give. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just kept helping. And though he didn't realize it, that single act of kindness, given without asking for anything, in return, was about to move mountains no one thought a child could shake, because sometimes the smallest hands hold the greatest power. The man's name was Charles Whitmore, a billionaire, yes. But more than that, a father without a son, husband left grieving, a man whose money had built towers, but whose life had crumbled beneath betrayal. The night Aidan found him, Charles had been buried not just in dirt, but in despair, set up by people he trusted, left to rot like he was nothing. But Aidan didn't see a billionaire. He saw life, and that saved them both. Weeks passed. Then, months. Charles recovered slowly, staying hidden while authorities unraveled the dark conspiracy that nearly ended him. But through it all, one person never left his side: Aidan. The boy who had nothing, gave everything, and Charles never forgot. 1 year later, a crowd gathered outside a brand new building in Aidan's hometown, once forgotten, now filled with light. It was a music and art academy. Aidan's name was etched in gold on the stone. Archway, the same boy who once scavenged for scrap to buy his mom's medicine. Reporters asked why. Charles simply said, "He gave me back my life." The least I could do was help him build his own. Aidan stood on that stage in his patched jeans, holding his mom's hand, his eyes wide, his heart honest. He didn't smile for cameras. He smiled for hope, because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes. They wear hand-me-downs, and they carry the world with kindness no one taught them, just something born deep in their bones. The world was shocked by what Aidan did. But in truth, he was always this strong. We just didn't know his name yet, until now. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?